Falls Lake City Commission meet to order. And the first item on the agenda is related to city elected official public information. And
Mayor, members of the commission, there's a memo attached with the staff report that came from the governor's office, obviously in response to the horrible things that happened in Minnesota about a week ago. And so I did send an email. So right now on the city's website, we have your name. A couple of you have a photo. We should probably make that uniform across the board, whether all photos or no photos. But obviously your name, your city issued email address, and your portfolios. So no cell phones, no at-home addresses, but Mayor, in talking with you, you felt it'd be worthwhile just broaching with the commission and having a discussion as to whether you guys feel that that is an appropriate level of information to be available to the public on the city's website and other forums. So I turn over to you.
you know, there's concerns about our safety, but I don't feel threatened by it on here. That's my personal feeling. I don't care if my picture's there, but I think it's a discussion, a short discussion we could have what your feelings are, either leave them or.
My picture looks like crap, so take it down.
Well, you can't help that. You look at it.
I think we're such a small community anyways. People are gonna know us, whether our picture's out here or not.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You're gonna, if they want to find out where I live.
Yeah, they already know where. Yeah.
Right.
867.
I mean, my picture's not on there, so.
But I do agree if we should have them all on there so that there's a visual to know who they are. Yeah, of course you.
Of course you'd want me to.
Well, I'm on. Yes,
No line replaced.
all equality, right?
Well, at the next commission meeting, we'll get an updated photo of any individuals that want an updated one.
We good with leaving them there then? Or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good with that, with the current information that's on there.
I wanted everybody's personal
If
feelings
they're
on
feeling
it.
froggy, I'm their huckleberry.
Well, no action necessary on that. It's just a matter we all agree and just leave it the way it is. Okay, the next item is on number 2 is a state blanket bond.
Yeah, this is a reoccurring thing that happens every June. Just wanted to get it in here at the special meeting. And it's really just a blanket bond in case somebody in the auditor's position would do something nefarious with city funds. And the city would be protected.
Do we need action on that?
Yes, approve the resolution, please.
Is there a motion from the commission?
Make motion.
Commissioner Eulenkamp,
I'll second it.
Commissioner Kanowski. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Eulenkamp.
Aye.
Commissioner Pierce.
Aye.
Commissioner Kanowski.
Aye.
Commissioner Hash.
Aye.
President Mo.
Aye, motion carried. Item number 3, the mosquito spraying strategy. I guess, Mike, have you got an update for us on that?
Based on the conversation that we had at the last commission meeting, crews have been out when the winds allow. Sometimes the winds at night don't allow that, so we're doing it in the morning to a limited extent. Mosquito counts right now, there's nothing out of the ordinary. They haven't jumped, they haven't done anything. But based on where we're at right now, we're going to continue spraying when the weather allows up through the 4th of July weekend. And then we'll go back to what is triggered by mosquito counts or complaints. Then we would do as necessary after that. I did reach out to the aerial folks a couple different times. Didn't get a hold of anybody to see if there is an option for an aerial spray if we did have something that crazy that happened as far as our mosquito counts. Just want to make sure that we're all on board with the same philosophy that we had at the last commission meeting, and based on the motion passed, that's what we'll proceed with through the 4th of July.
Anybody have any issues or
Because
concerns?
we can get a number of ground sprays for the price of
What?
an aerial spray.
That's correct.
I prefer to keep it that way.
Yeah, and trap counts are pretty low, right?
Right. There's nothing, they haven't jumped in. That can
I
change.
can't,
Right. We all
sit in my
understand.
yard, I haven't had a mosquito bite yet.
Well,
I mean, oh yeah, okay. Ouch.
And that can change with the rain and some heat.
yeah.
Right. I think residents play a big role in what we're doing as far as our mosquito control. You know, you have to empty that, any tires that would hold water, any fountains that are holding water, stagnant water, that's a breeding ground. We try and, we do treat, you know, many of the stagnant water areas throughout town. Can you get them all? No. Can you get them all perfect? No. But what we do try and do is limit the amount of mosquitoes that hatch in the first place. So we do that with dunks and various chemicals that we put out in like sloughs, water areas, things like that.
How often do you do that?
But the dunks that we use are 90-day dunks. So we try and get out when the water temperature gets to a point where mosquitoes can start to hatch, and then we apply the chemical and we get 90 days out of it. That's all I have for mosquitoes, and
Okay.
I don't envision anything aerial unless all of a sudden we have numbers that just skyrocket. And then we'll see what we have to do at that point. If that's fair, that's what we'll continue with.
No action necessary on that then, if we all agree on that? Okay. Okay, item number 4, cemetery work change order for project 250102, a mill and overlay of the original town site. Mike?
I don't have any change order paperwork put together yet. I have not received any feedback from the contractor. This spring, we had some frost boils throughout town. It was a tough year for roadways. I think the townships really see it on some of the gravel roadways. We see it in town on some of our pavement. But the main access road to the cemetery, the one that extends off of 7th Street, that's the main access road. It has pavement for that first section. That had significant frost boiling this spring. I received some complaints on it. Mayor, I think you had voiced some concerns on it. With the current project that we have with mill and overlaying and doing work throughout the city, we have a contractor in town. And there's some economy of scale benefits, right? When somebody gets mobilized here, we pay so much per ton for asphalt. We pay so much per ton for gravel. What the change order would entail would be reconstructing that first section of roadway that's experienced the complete base failure. It's soft. You can see that the pavement has heaved and shoved. And then we would overlay the next section going to that first road, the approach access by our shop. In doing that, that project, we could get it all done, including engineering, for under $60,000. Right now, the estimate is under 50. I don't want to, 60 would give us a buffer in case we have to remove some more soils than what we're envisioning right now. We're looking at building that roadway to our standard city specification. And I think that would be adequate. But once we get in there, if there is no bottom, if there's a lot of water, we may have to subcut some additional pour material out and add some additional gravel. So with that work, if we change order onto our existing contract and we have that economy of scale benefit, we could have that work completed for under that $60,000 mark. If we use our standard city bid for what we bid out every year for roadway repair, it would be more than double that. So if we're going to make some improvements to that cemetery, the main access road to our cemetery, the one that typically is the one that's driven on when you access the cemetery, now would be a time to do that. I did visit with Spencer, looked at our infrastructure miscellaneous account. There's enough money left in that section alone that would be able to cover any improvements that we did to the cemetery based on this change order. In addition to that, there's, the other projects that we're working on. Right now, they're under budget. So there would be some money left there. I don't want to speak to that quite yet because we're not through the project, right? It might be that when we get construction equipment in this area of town, all of a sudden that road blows up. In which case we have to do some more subcut. We have to remove some additional asphalt. But right now it looks like they're going to be under budget as well. So there are funds available to do it. If that's something that the commission would be interested in pursuing, we would pursue the change order paperwork. I would have that available for the commission. Right now, it doesn't look like the contractor is going to be back until after the 4th of July. So I'd have the change order paperwork ready for commission approval the first meeting in July. But I don't want to pursue that if somebody says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait for some. Right now, the way our infrastructure capital improvement plan is laid out, if we're going to improve that road, now's the time to do it. Right? We have pretty competitive pricing, and to get that same like work in that same area is going to be some time out based on our capital improvement plan.
As Mike had said, number one, cautious optimism, right? That the bids that we got for the projects will hold and we'll have significant cost savings between there, which would make up the 60 grand. And even if it didn't, the infrastructure miscellaneous line can handle that as well.
How much do we have on that one?
It's a total budget of 125 grand. I want to say so far about 40.
It's something important. It's the heart of our city with the cemetery, you know? It's really,
I think the timing is right. I mean,
Yeah.
we got the
We have somebody
contractor.
down there right now anyways, willing to do it. And the
Price is
cost
half.
savings is half.
it's kind of,
Logical.
I'd call it a no-brainer myself. You know? And the cemetery is an important place. I mean, you want that to always look its
Well, we're all
best.
gonna end up there.
They're dying to get in. Okay, a little humor.
See how it is when nobody likes your humor?
Yeah.
Not like, again, as Mike said, not looking for formal approval, but we do kind of want a green light from the commission so we can work with the contractor and bring a final change order to you at the next commission.
I'm
I say
all for it.
proceed.
We will pursue along those lines.
Perfect. I think that'd be a great use of the funds. Okay, item number 5 is the general fund budget review and discussion.
Members of the commission, really, the goal for this meeting, if on the second page, objective for this conversation is we want to just make sure that we communicate, also to, the city commission, but also the public, what the expense side of the general fund entails, explore the revenue side of the general fund, and then Rob's going to make sure everybody has an understanding with the new property tax rules that came from the state, the 3% cap and the property tax credit, of what that means for the city of Devils Lake and this budget cycle, with the calculations on what we levied in previous years and what we would be permitted to do this year. We also have, if you have questions along the way, please just interject. Some of them may be in a future slide, but the reason we've got Chief Toso here and Rob and Mike as well. So first thing is pass-through funds. I just wanted to get this one out of the way. These are pass-through revenues and expenses that come through. There is really no policy decision-making that has to do with any of these. The money comes in and it just goes out to the lodging and the restaurant tax goes to the Chamber of Tourism. The Park District's quarter-cent sales tax goes to them, and then 30% of the state aid that we receive goes to the park board. So that money comes in and then it goes out. There's really no, and so when we talk about general fund expenses and I talk about percentages, it's after the pass-through, right? It's once the policy decision-making is actually there, instead of just the money coming in and out that we don't have any really. So the next piece is just the general fund expenses. This is the pie chart that we had created. Again, this is general fund expenses after the pass-through or before pass-throughs go. Police 37, fire 14, LEC, court and legal. So just demonstrating that public safety makes up a huge chunk of the budget, 63%. General government, which I'm labeling as auditing, engineering, and assessing, that's 17%, and then streets, weeds 10%, and then the other is 10% as well. And I have a rundown of each one of these. So if you look at public safety spending specifically since 2010, with the sales tax proposal that we are presenting to the community, one of the things that we're communicating is the rise in public safety spending that we've seen over the last 15 years. In 2010, the city had 16 police officers and 10 vehicles, and now in 2025, we have 20 officers and 14 vehicles. The population of the town is relatively the same as it was 15 years ago in 2010. As far as fire department mayor, we've gone back and forth. The budget documents say 5. You think that there was 6 from back when you were there. So I don't know that we got to work that out, but
There was
I have
6.
5 on here. In the budget, there was 5. So I don't know. So we'll have to get to the bottom of that.
5, but they had 6.
We did we?
That's just how.
I think I got enough proof.
Well, we'll get to the bottom of that. But regardless, we have at least one more, and on paper, 2 more firefighters than we did 15 years ago as well. Fully staffed fire station, which is something that pure communities our size don't typically do, as well as assuming the air rescue firefighting mission. So you can see via the bar graph, the police has taken up a bigger chunk, and then on the bottom, law enforcement center and 911 is increasingly taking up a bigger chunk as well. Public safety, I think it's important to understand where the expenses come from. And public safety, I took the LAC out of this. It's hard to determine, obviously our contributions go to help pay for people there and salary expenses, but just immediately here, police, fire, municipal court, and half the city attorney, 82% of that is salaries and benefits to employees, includes health insurance and the like. I already kind of touched on this, police and fire department since 2010 to 2025. And then if you go LAC and 911 contributions, if you follow the graph as far as what the city has contributed, this includes the $60,000 lease payment that we do. In my mind, that's a police department expense, right? Because that's how we're housed in the police department, but it's always been a separate line item with the LAC section. So that's included in here. It really, I think the story is in 2019 to 2020, something changed, and it really took off as far as what we were contributing. And I think, talking with people that have had some experience working there, at least in the past, and Rob, our city assessor over there, there was a total shift in how they funded themselves. They went from, I think it was predominantly county, and the counties were contributing mills, and they went to more of a usage model. I'm sure that there have been a lot of discussions over the past on that, but from the city standpoint, in favor and against, whatever. But
Does this include the money that was put forward for all of the software upgrades and all that stuff?
actually, no, that does not include that. So that does not include the CAD system is being paid from a different fund than the general fund. So that
Well,
actually was not included.
This includes a lot of the upgrades that they had to make, like that $1 million video camera system or whatever. I think that.
So, yeah, so some of the contributions, they went from in 2019 under 200,000 to now cumulatively near 700. So those are things that the cities had to make up through a variety of means, of which we'll go through the revenue side. Coming further. This is just one of the things, people talk. I'm going to talk about the administrative staffing part of the general fund here pretty soon. But if you just look at, if you charted the CPI spending, or you charted spending via public safety versus administration, and you followed the consumer price index from 2010 onward, as you can see on the public safety side, there's a big gap in the difference. And as far as the administrative side of things, has been kept even with the CPI since 2010. So yeah, I know a lot of people, it's like with the federal government, sometimes they talk about discretionary spending and administration, all that sort of stuff. And I think one of the things to demonstrate with the chart is that as far as, we'll say, the desk work type of things that the city does like this has remained consistently flat since 2010.
In the public safety with the police, what has changed that we are going so further up? What is what's driving that? What do you think? I mean, what would
Well,
be
CAD
some
for
of the
one
things?
is a huge,
The what?
we're not talking salaries, we're just talking basic operations.
Yeah, well, the need for more and what is there increased calls for service or
And maybe the
what were
history of
things?
how we got from 16 officers to 20 officers, because as you said, 82% or a huge chunk.
We have
was
to
salaries.
try to explain that and support it the best way we
And this
can.
is aside from,
Or was it the
you
chief?
said the
that kept-
salaries are in line with the CPI.
No. So the whole public
But-
safety spending, right?
Well, we want
is
to,
increased,
Yeah, we
right?
got the
justify
escrow,
what we
the
used as
task force
justification
position.
for it was pretty much there was increases in.
And cost for service.
Yeah.
And the types of calls we were taking, the amount of time it takes, the necessity for SROs, the additions for that. So
Executive
there was,
sergeant's position.
yeah, and supervision in certain areas that were necessities.
Just kind of wanted to have just
Yeah.
bring that discussion.
Yeah.
I also, police cars cost significantly more than they did
Everything,
14 years ago,
yeah.
and now we're putting $20,000 to $25,000 for electronic equipment in them. I doubt it was that much back in
And camera
2010.
systems, so that's for your own protection.
Computer
and-
systems.
Used to get everything installed at the fire department.
Yeah,
Take it out of one car and put it in another.
yeah, that was simple then.
We're talking back in
62, wasn't it?
That must have been your
89,
sixth
90,
employee.
91,
Yeah.
92.
Well,
Was that
one of
your
them was
sixth employee?
Sixth, well, the-
So now you don't
No,
reuse
that was
anything in a
before that.
vehicle anymore. It's almost all brand new.
yeah,
They they change so much that you
Right.
put in all
Yeah,
brand new
reality
stuff.
Oh, you can't work in any of these cars anymore.
And everything's
unless
got
you
a
have all the-
5-year life on it, Mayor. So
Yeah.
you're looking at
Yeah,
a
they've
camera.
changed the
You change
cameras and the
cameras on
radios.
5 years, the radios.
Yep.
yeah. So, that's.
Just need some of that.
And I feel like, and I just feel comfortable. I think it would be disingenuous if we compare it to the CPI or inflation if there was significant population change. But the fact that the populations kind of stay the same, I feel like it's an okay thing to do, right? Because if you're a different community and all of a sudden you're like Watford City and your population's tripled, that's different, right? On spending. So just want to put that chart together just to kind of demonstrate some of that. Do we want to continue to talk about public safety?
No,
Or
no, I
would you like
think
to
we
move
got, I'm fine with it.
on? Good. Okay. So now on to we'll say the office work type of stuff, city assessing, auditing, engineering. I included the city, city commission, the HR consultant, half the city attorney. Just so half the city attorney is half kind of the city attorney work, and then he serves as the city prosecutor with municipal court and those sort of things. And I asked Mr. Saylor once, and I said, how would you carry this? Okay. So feel comfortable with that. So if you look at the salaries versus full expenses of the departments, 95%. It's really just, it's personnel, and it's the health insurance and salaries. Let's just flip to the next page. I want to kind of demonstrate how some of the administrative staff is paid for in the general fund. So if you look on the right-hand side, you see the green highlights is project administration and legal. We'll talk about that in just a moment. That has to do with engineering. But you see how we transfer in 20% of all of our utility revenue, water, sewer, and streets, or water, sewer, and sanitation. 20% of the revenue generated in those accounts go into the general fund. And then the other highlighted line item in yellow is the interdepartment. So it's the general fund share with the enterprise funds. The enterprise funds help pay for the city's admin staff. So in the auditing department, it pays for all of the utility billing clerk position, as well as 25% of all of the other staffing. If you go down to the engineering department, it pays for 33%. It pays for a third of the engineering staff's work, primarily because public works director operates in that department, as well as Helen and Devin provide a lot of support to those departments as well. So a significant portion of those salaries and benefits are offset by the utility accounts, not solely general fund revenue. Well, I suppose utility transfer is general fund, but you get what I'm saying. It's not predominantly property tax. Okay. Any questions on that? I'll move on. And then the engineering. So specifically with the engineering department, the one thing that we hear when we talk about city staffing is the size of the engineering department. The size of the engineering department compared to the size of the town is distorted and whatever. And one of the things that we do, and I would consider this an asset to the community, is when we do engineering for a project, instead of paying a consultant, we're acting like the engineering firm. And what we do is when we have a construction project, we charge that construction project 16% when we do it in-house. And we send that 16% into the general fund, and then we pay for the project. The only other way to do it would be to hire a KLJ or more engineering, an AE2S, and we would be paying them the 16%, or it would probably be more than the 16%. We'll just say it's the 60%. That money would just go out the door. It would not go into the general fund. And so since 2010, I went down, how much did the engineering department bring in via revenue for doing our own project engineering versus how much did it bring in, or how much were the expenses via just to run the department, salaries, benefits, equipment. And you can see that over the whole life of the last 15 years, they are plus $379,000. So technically, if you want to think about it, the city engineering department makes the city $25,000 a year, roughly. And half the years they earn money for us, and half the year they lose a little bit. Right? And so I think what I'm trying to demonstrate with this is in the department where I would say the general citizen thinks, hey, maybe staff is a little bloated, is the one department where if they didn't exist, it wouldn't help with any city revenue generating propositions, right? We wouldn't be cutting anything because we would just be eliminating also a revenue source as well. People understand, is there a firm understanding there, or can I explain it better? Did I miss anything with that, Mike? I know you're proud of that.
I appreciate you putting that together, Spencer.
So,
It's probably the only department that makes money. I mean, I know the PD don't make money.
you guys definitely do not make any money. So,
Oh, that's 8 years.
so I put that out there where, so like
Fire
I said,
department does.
Just shut up.
Hey, it offsets about 300 grand a year.
so I think the general sense is if all of a sudden woke up tomorrow and there was no engineering department, it's not like we can cut a bunch of property tax or sales tax
No.
or anything, because now we don't have that revenue source that goes to
Right.
the general.
We are fortunate to have Devin. I mean, we do have 2 licensed engineers in the back, myself and Devin. We're both licensed. But Devin brings a level, 15, 20 years ago, we received a full-fledged GPS, survey grade GPS unit. It cost $80,000, but we got it charged off to a project that the State Water Commission helped fund it. And we have that set up on our water building, our water treatment facility, so we can go out and do our own surveying. So we survey the project, and then we lay it out in CAD, and then we design the project. We can do all of that in-house. And with his talents, we're able to just bring it to another level and are able to keep things in-house that many communities our size would be hiring a firm to do it. And if you're hiring a firm to do it, you're paying mileage, you're paying, that 16% would not cover it.
With
It would
all
be
those
significantly
projects
higher.
we've done in the last 10 years of infrastructure upgrades, that's paid off with having our own engineering. If we'd had to hire an engineer for all those projects, that would have cost us a lot of money.
And not only do you have to do the engineering, but you have to do all the paperwork that comes with it, especially when you have federal funding involved. You have the CARS program. You have to do a lot of things to get there. So there's a lot of administrative work with it. And sometimes if you have a very small department, all you can do is that administrative part. In our particular case, we're able to do the administrative part and the engineering part, not only the design engineering, but the construction engineering with that. So we're fortunate. And we're fortunate to have the talent that we have back there, Helen and Devin.
And then I would just add also too with the city assessor's office. My understanding, city assessor's office is running on one less FTE than they were, right? Than they were 5 years ago. Is that correct?
There's 2 less in the back department.
Yeah.
Over the course of the last 10 years. We just have a secretary and another assessor, building official. So we have 2 full-time equivalents in the back that are less than what we had not that many years ago.
And
The other staff has picked up those spots.
Yeah. And I know that Rob punches above his weight on things beyond just city assessment with the city council too. So we appreciate that from him. I can move on to the next slide. Oh, non-departmental, the significant items and expenses, just to, what are the things that make up that 10% in that pie chart? IT network manager that we pay, corporate tech, audit fees. We're doing 2 audits this year, so that's a significant chunk of change there for the city. Equipment insurance, computers, street lighting, and mosquito control. Those are paid for via a fee on the utility bill. And then outside support to other organizations. I kind of put a breakdown on the right-hand side: Senior Veteran Rides, Mid-State Volunteer Program, Lake Access, Heritage Center, and the Community Shelter. Out of the general fund.
Explain to me, what's the Mid-State Volunteer Program?
She was just here.
It's a machi type
It's
thing.
the Amachi.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's gotten multiple names over the last couple of years, I think.
Because I've never heard it called that, anything called that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the expense side. If any questions on the expense side? No. Revenue. Okay, I listed, we'll say, the 7 predominant revenue sources that we have here. And I ranked them from highest to lowest over what we've received over the last 15 years. Sales tax, property tax, utility transfers, state aid, project engineering, and then interest earnings and loan repayments. And then the other one's fire chief license. It's made up of a whole different variety of sources of things like liquor licenses, mosquito control fees, parking, street light fee, franchise fees on Midco and NDTC lines, grants, a whole variety of things. So,
I think our parking ticket fines need to go up. I mean, honestly, it had, that little bit of a fee there does not really ever cause people not to want to do it.
For in the residential, is that a $10 fee? Or is that-
Residential,
Yeah,
well, it depends on
street,
you're not talking downtown.
no, downtown's 40, right?
Residential, it's the regular parking ticket is $10.
Yeah.
But I think it's 25 for the streets, residential.
Hmm.
But any other parking, like, restricted zone and areas is $10.
We doubled the fee in the wintertime. Going around a vehicle with a street sweeper is different than going around a vehicle.
Oh, yeah, I'm aware, but I'm
We
like
do
I'm
have that
saying,
in our rates and fees where
Right.
the rates for the parking fees double. And
with the street sweepers and sweeping, or even parking on the corners where they're not supposed to be parked, a $10 fee to me doesn't seem like it's enough to
Some
deter
motivation.
people from doing that, knowing it's wrong doing.
yeah, and I know the state recently changed some laws with sort of tickets and those sorts of things. And so as part of the budget process, we try to line up the revenue projections as well. So we ask you guys to approve the rates and fees with the budget cycle. So if that's we want to have that conversation when we discuss rates and fees, does that seem?
I mean, I think it's worth talking about and looking at. Because I mean, I've always thought, I hated paying that $10 because I had kids at that time and okay, I ain't doing that shit. But it just seems like it really doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
Why were you parking there?
because I was lazy.
What bugs me, I guess, is if the downtown, he wanted them to patronize the drinking establishments, but they do the right thing and leave their vehicle, and they get a $40 ticket or $80 ticket.
I agree.
And I'd just like to see something, if we could work something out where an alternate
Right.
parking spot so that we kind of like we're setting them up for failure.
You don't want them to drink and drive, but you're
Yeah,
gonna give them a parking ticket for sitting there. I mean,
yeah,
I can see, if it's not picked up by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that's a whole different
Mhm.
thing.
yeah. I don't know, that might be something we'd like to have a conversation about, and see if we can pick, on certain nights, you can park here without a worry. And I think the businesses downtown would appreciate us having that conversation too.
But I think the whole thing with moving, no matter what street or avenue you put it on, you still gotta move it.
Yeah,
And I don't like that at all. Because you're making them drive.
Maybe the 2 times that you do it per week, early Monday morning, early Friday morning, that's when you do the streets and avenues as well.
yeah,
And then you leave it open, so the weekend would be open.
yeah.
Um,
It's just
And
something
I've talked
that,
to Mike about this, in the
Yeah.
past, so. And then when they were actually doing it, to be out there and actually clean the streets.
yeah,
Because we
yeah,
see, we quite often see in law enforcement where we issue the citation and nobody's cleaning.
Yeah.
true.
It makes it very difficult to write the ticket.
I would agree.
We are told to write it, so we do write it.
There's some issues with that. You have downtown parking lots. So if you were going to go to a downtown establishment and have a drink, you can park in a downtown parking lot. Those aren't ticketed every night. There's specific lots that are ticketed on Friday nights. There's specific lots that are ticketed on Monday nights. So you have ample parking in parking lots all the time. So you would have a safe place to park and leave your vehicle any day of the week. You just have to go to a parking lot and choose if you're drinking on a Thursday night, because we clean the lots Friday morning. It's a Friday lot, but it's Friday morning. So you're able to park in those parking lots. We sweep the downtown on Friday nights and Monday nights. We try and clean it for the weekend, and then we try and clean up after the weekend. That's the intent of that. The big issue is snow removal. You can't clean part of downtown. You have to clean all of downtown because you're mobilizing all the equipment. In many cases, you're hiring snow removal trucks to haul the snow because
That's
we don't have the
understandable.
capacity.
The things for safety and
Yeah.
stuff, but that's understandable. But
So the snow removal part of it, I don't know how you can, not.
You almost
clean the
have to have
street.
them out of there.
You have to have everything out of there. And one of the biggest complaints that we hear is consistency. Why did he get a ticket and I didn't get a ticket? Or, it's
Yeah.
vice versa. It's that, so when people don't get a ticket, they got lucky, right? But people see that too. And so when you're not consistent, that's the complaints that we receive, because the person who got a ticket will complain about the person that didn't get one ticket. And is there favoritism? I don't think there's any favoritism going on, but that's something that we hear. I just visited with Sam earlier this week on that, about some favoritism. People don't know whether somebody went out there and pulled their ticket off, and then the other person didn't take their ticket off, and so they only see one ticket. Who knows what happened there? But downtown would be a challenge if we were to address that. Now, if somebody wanted to say, we're not going to ticket during the summer months, okay, but then the street sweeper has to jog in and out, and you're not gonna have clean downtown. Right now, there's already a challenge cleaning. We tried to fix some of the corner areas and things. That's where all the cigarette butts collect.
I'd have to give it a bit of an argument against. It seems they're not being cleaned when you're saying they're being cleaned.
We have not noticed a lot of times that they're out.
They
I
just
just heard
don't.
it from my officers the other day. But what you could do in the wintertime as well, is you can still keep it Monday and Friday. It's just if there's a special need for it, we can broadcast that. We can get on our city page, we can our PD page and say, we're gonna be doing this cleaning because of this storm that came through. We can put the announcements out there. That's what you do differently in the wintertime.
Mhm.
But we can keep it Monday and Friday. That's what I've been arguing for.
Well, Monday and Friday is only the parking lots.
You
If
can
we
do
get
a
a snow
whole-
on a Monday, we have to clean snow on a Tuesday as soon as the sidewalks get cleared, because they're at downtown.
But then you just broadcast that's what you're doing. If it's an emergency, you have to do it. But that would be your consistency, I would say.
Like Spencer said, that's something we can argue it.
Yeah, it's just to
Yeah.
put some thought to some of this and have that kind of conversation. I'd like to include
Debate, not argue.
a couple of, or debate, yeah, not argue, but have some of the downtown, establishments involved in some of the
To your
conversation.
point, when they had the beer crawl here just recently.
Yeah.
They received complaints from the chamber that they got tickets, because our guys are out there ticketing.
Yeah.
And they were trying to do the right thing at the beer crawl by not driving.
Right.
afterwards. And then-
I know, and that's the stuff
So
I hear,
yeah.
and actually I left my vehicle one night and come back to a nice $40 ticket. My donation to the city,
They must have wrote it wrong.
huh? Or whatever.
Should have been higher.
Same price again.
Sure, it should have. But,
Yeah, I think we
but,
can debate. a little
I mean-
There's gotta be a better path forward.
Right.
A lot of times they're not getting out there. No
Yeah.
offense to them.
and we may not come up with a total solution, but if it would help a little bit, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think 2 days of consistency, the beginning of the weekend of the week.
Yep. I think that's, we should have that conversation with a few of them.
Okay, Mike.
Okay, don't need to belabor that.
I put the revenue sources for the general fund in a bar graph for you guys to kind of see the levels. Sales tax was just over 1.8 million, property tax just around 1.5. The utility transfers well over 1.3. So you guys can see there via the bar graph. And put the line graph in there just to demonstrate kind of how the revenue comes in year over year. And I'll just start at the bottom, like the project engineering. When we have a lot of projects, it goes up, and when we don't, it goes down, right? So it's very, I don't think inconsistent is the right word, but it's up and down, up and down. The state aid goes with the state's economy. How is oil and gas revenue doing out west is really predominantly what dictates that sort of stuff. And the green is the utility transfers that you can see. That's pretty linear. You increase water rates a certain percentage, a certain extra percentage gets put into the general fund. The property tax, that's very linear. Since about the last 10 years, it's been pretty linear. And then, as you can see, sales tax, kind of up and down as far as what we put in the general fund. But if you look at 2019 to 2024, it goes up quite a bit. 2019, we were putting 1.2 million in sales tax revenue in the general fund, and now we're putting in 1.8. And I think the story is you saw some of the cost increases on the public safety. We've been slowly increasing the amount of sales tax we put in. And I have that in a future slide as well. General fund property tax revenue, I think people always like to know what their paid property taxes relative to what everything else is going up. Slightly a little bit over the CPI, but very much in tune with it. you need help with staff. And so now this, and just so you know, these slides, except the last one that Rob's going to go over through, were just pulled straight from the North Dakota Association of Counties presentation they gave at the political subdivision summit they had on the new property tax rules. And
I tried to sit and watch that. Now it was just like, who are these people?
Yeah. So some of these slides are, and so Rob's going to give you, we'll say mill levies and caps in a world, or in the new property tax rules. And so I'm going to turn over to Rob Mayer, if that'd be okay.
Yep.
He's going to give you guys a briefing.
You work in sanitation now?
I represent all departments.
Okay.
Yes. So, yeah, no, and I'm gonna kind of give a high overview of this. I'm not gonna get too far into the weeds. If you really want to get into the calculations and stuff, just feel free to swing in and we can go through those. But obviously, the voters of the state and the legislature really made a push to have some form of property tax reform and relief, which was done through House Bill 1176. And one of the key things to note for our residents is that the primary residence credit, which was the $500 last year, is now $1,600 this year. I expect it'll be $1,600 again next year for the biennium, but they're projecting to continue to increase that in future legislative sessions. So that number should hopefully continue to increase as time goes by, which is good relief for the residents. The caps on the local governments, so this is the reform part of it, is 3%. And you know, we're used to talking in mills, and I think we need to start adjusting and getting used to talking in dollars, because that's most of how the calculations are done is with dollars and not necessarily looking at the mills. The unused percentage of the increase can be carried over for up to 5 years. So if you don't max out and use that 3% increase, whatever you don't use, you can carry over, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a couple of slides. And then the taxing districts can opt out, so you don't have to be held to that cap. If you take it to your voters of your jurisdiction during the general election and they agree to do that. There are some things you have to do within that, and we'll get to that too. So those are the main things that we're going to cover. So the limitations on levies without voter approval. So there's two ways that you can determine the cap. They've got what they call the base year levy and then the adjusted year levy. We're not going to look at the base year levy because that's not what we're going to use. We are going to use what's called the adjusted year levy. The base year levy would be something we would look at if our property, the dollars we've levied in taxes have gone down over the last 3 years. Since they've gone up, that's not going to apply. To determine our cap, we are using the adjusted year. Okay, so we'll be done with that slide. We'll go on to the next one. So unused excess percentage increase. So, and we'll get to this in more detail as we get to the actual calculations, but say when you set your levies for the budget for 2026, you only do an increase of 1% over what our new growth would allow. That means that you would have 2% that you can carry over and use at some point over the next 5 years. And I think the next page is going to show how that works as far as for that carryover. So when you're looking at the table, the percentage increase needed for budget. So year one, you're increasing your budget only 1%. That means you have 2% you didn't utilize. Now you get to use and carry that over. So the next year, you only use 2%. So you still have 1% you didn't use. So now you're up to 3% on your rolling balance. So then conceivably in year 3, you could actually go 6% and still be within the cap. On here, they show 5%. So then you have no excess to add, but you use 2% of your balance. So now you're down to 1% for carryover. And the way that the carryover works is that you use the oldest percentage of carryover so that 5 years keeps moving down. So you don't, as you accumulate more balance, those will stay for their 5 years. Any questions on that? Makes sense. Okay.
In a general sense, I think of it as you can only increase 15% over 5 years.
Right.
Really, that's what, absent new growth. That's really what I see it with that 5-year window.
I touched on the the opt-out of caps with the voter approval. Again, it has to be at a general election. That's the only time you can do it. And then when you do that, you can only do it for up to 4 years. Then you would have to bring it back to the voters again for approval if you wanted to opt out of the caps. And if you do that, then the measure has to have the verbiage that indicates the percentage of increase that you're looking to go in excess of the cap. And then you also have to have the dollar amount so that you're going above the cap that you would have.
Is this for city residents only, or is that
So
for,
that our election would be only for the city residents, for our budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so now we get to my calculation page. This is where,
If there's one page that you need a whole presentation, it's one page.
this is it, because these are the numbers we're using. So this is gonna be for the budget for 2026. And we're gonna start at step one. So step one is to determine what the previous year actual mill was. So when the budget was done last year, the mill that we had was 90.11. Now, the mill here, after running the actual numbers, is 91.78. And that's because the taxable value was less than what we had projected. And some of that is as a result of like the utilities. We don't know the utility values, so we projected those out. I overestimated those last year. So that's where the value was lower than we expected, which brings the actual mill rate up. Okay, so the step one is determining that mill rate, which we're going to use in the calculation in step 3. So the second step is to determine our new growth. Now, this is probably one of the most important aspects, and it's something that I know that I will get better at over the coming years to really make sure we're tracking and getting all the new growth that we can, because new growth does not count towards your cap. So what we have is we have true and full value. You'll see the totals there for commercial and residential. Then it turns it into taxable value. So that new growth includes things like the Dollar General, Les Schwab, the townhomes on 16th Street Southeast. Those were all new construction that added value, so that was considered new growth. It also includes demolitions. So you think of the old Great American Inn, the old Pizza Hut. Those demolitions would have been subtracted to come up with those numbers. So that's how the new growth is determined. So our taxable value of the new growth for our city is $455,638. We're going to take that now into step 3 to determine what is the dollars that we can levy now in addition to what we had last year based off of the new growth. So you'll take that times the number of mills we figured out in step 1 to come up with $41,817. So we take that $41,817, we add it to the amount that was levied for 2025, and we get $2,118,492. That's our base. So that's if you can levy up to that without using any of the cap. So that is your base levy that you would be looking at without doing any utilization of the 3% cap. So then I took that number down and put it in step 5 so that you can see what it looks like as far as what the mill rate would be based off of our 2025 valuations, where we had a taxable value for the city at $24,175,248. So if you were to just use that $2,118,492 for the budget, the mill rate would be 87.63. And that would be a 2.01% increase over last year on your budget. Now, if you're to use 1% of the cap, you'll see the next line. That's 1% of the cap. All the way down to where we have the 3% increase, which is the cap of $2,182,047, which you can't exceed that on your levy for property taxes. That is your cap. So when you're looking at your budget, that's the number you're going to use.
This also includes the mills that $2,076,000 includes the airport and the library and the Jobs Development Authority all together.
Yeah. So 90.26 mils is the max that you can assess for property values, which would be a 5.07% increase over the budget for 2025.
So you can, as you can tell, right? They say the 3% cap, but in reality, because of new growth, it's really like 5.
I know it's a lot.
yeah, well, we have you.
Yeah. No, and if you have questions, like I said, I have no problems sitting down.
Really, the city, the policy making from the city commission when you go through the budget cycle, right?
Yeah.
You see the 1%, 2%, 3%. Is how much do we want to bank, if any at all, versus what we need to get done, right? With the variety of the library and the airport and the city's general fund and whatnot. How much of it to use, how much you want to bank for future budgets for yourself. And obviously, the residents of the community are the ones that are paying.
And I would add to that, because Spencer brings up a good point specific to, this is all the property taxes that are levied in dollars. Just because it's a 3% cap doesn't mean that that needs to be distributed evenly that way amongst those different items. I mean, you can still only give a 1% increase in one spot, and you can, it's just, they're gonna look at your total dollars levied. How you split that out, they
It
don't
doesn't
care.
matter.
Right.
Let's see if I can make this make sense. What was the percentage increase in raising the property taxes last year from the year before?
It was like 10%. Because we had the huge increase in valuations.
Yeah.
So we had projected a full mill decrease, despite the fact of the increased spending on the property tax because of the valuations.
And that's why I think you start really looking at dollars instead of the mills.
Yeah.
Because I thought mills can be misleading sometimes.
We can revisit this slide as we talk about the budgets as well. Maybe we can make that to be the precursor to our budget
Yeah.
discussions, if you would like that.
It'll help you understand how it's,
It makes much more sense to me now than it did when I tried to sit and watch and sit through that briefing.
And there are still some things that we're working through, like on the new growth side, what actually qualifies as new growth? Does someone who takes an unfinished basement and finish it, is that now new growth? Or does it require new construction? So there's a lot of that we have to work through yet. And I've got a conference in August where we're going to be going with the tax commissioner's office, going through all of those things.
Yeah, I remember they were saying things like you can't include like railway system, things of that nature can't be included into their.
And those are I refer to it as utilities. Those are your centrally assessed properties where the state handles that. We don't do the assessment of those properties. So we don't get those numbers until later in the year.
is the school, is that included in it or is that not? The
They're part of
schools?
this too, but now for them, it's their entire district. So
Okay.
they take our growth plus the growth that they would have from the entire
Okay.
district.
All right.
So this is actually the determining the net growth. Yeah, that's kind of subjective, isn't it, to a point? Or is that,
We're trying to make it so it's just, here's what, it's something we already track within the office for the state.
Is that based on your permits to determine what the new growth?
So the things that qualify for new growth would be something that goes from taxable or from non-taxable to taxable. So think of your exemptions. Something gets given us an exemption, the value it had is actually deducted, so it's actually a loss. Then when it comes back on your tax rolls, now it counts as new growth. So that's.
Like our hospital now, goes from a non-taxable to
That
a
would be new
taxable.
growth. Yep, so when that happens, that'll become new growth. That will be added to that. So one of the things I didn't touch on here for the big contributor to our new growth was the Mob Estates. That TIF came off of, it dissolved and was completed. So that's new growth. So $6 million of that is from the Mob Estates. So that's where a bulk of that is. The other things that can contribute to new growth are going to be your new construction, so Les Schwab, Dollar General, annexation, so anything that you would annex into the city, that would be new growth, and then those TIF districts, as they would be dissolved, then that would become new growth.
Everybody crystal clear?
not really? Kind of.
I can continue, Mayor, if you'd like.
Yep. Please do.
And then just on the revenue side of things as well, just put the sales tax. This is the sales tax allocation that we put to the general fund. I put that in a bar graph. In 2020, 2021, 2022, we put 40% of all of our sales tax revenue in the general fund. We have increasingly had to put a higher percentage into the general fund. And now, today, in 2025, we're putting 42.75% in the general fund. The max, given our ordinances and the purposes that the sales taxes have been dedicated to, the max we can put in the general fund is 44%. So when we look at, hey, what are the sales taxes for? When you see the line property tax relief, that's this 44%. So that's the max that we can put in. So we have been increasing, and we're getting close to the top, right? And so things like, well, we have the sales tax, we have sales tax revenue, and if we just did fewer construction projects, we would free up some of our sales tax dollars. Well, that's true, but we couldn't put them into the general fund right now, even if the city commission wanted to do that for property tax relief, because we're capped at the 44%. And the difference between like in 2024, if we had put 40% of the sales tax revenue in general fund versus the 42 point, or versus the, well, sorry, in 2024 dollars, so it's a little bit. So the 2.75% difference, it equates to equates to $118,000 in 2024 sales tax revenue money that we brought in. So that's the extra delta that we're putting in the general fund to keep the wheels on the bus going for the public safety spending and just the general operations of the general fund to keep it going. If I explain that well enough. And then again, the utility transfers, we already touched base on this, but just a quick summary, 20% of all the revenue generating water, sewer, and sanitation fund goes in the general fund. 33% of the cost of engineering department personnel is covered by the utility funds, and then all of the utility building clerk and 25% of the remaining auditing department personnel. And so really what I want to show you guys is what I see that we are facing moving forward. Just given my assessment of the revenue sources we have, the expenses that we have. So if you look at the salaries, FICA, Medicare, and the retirement contributions, if we provide, a step increase to our employees, which usually occurs on July 1, contingent upon their performance. Some steps are more than 2% if they're on the beginning end of the pay scale, and some are 2%. But I'm just, in the effort to steel man this, I just put the 2% on July 1. A 1% change would cost us $76,000, $592. A 2% change in cost of living is that $118,526. When we come to present the budget and salary plan, the CPI from May 2024 to May 2025, I believe, was about 2.3 when I checked. We'll have to see what that number is June to June. So the recommendation on the cost of living, I've kind of told the department head, is going to be somewhere between 2 to 2.5% if it's going to keep up with the market and the spending, right? You guys will have the final determination on what that number is, but that will be the first, we'll say, volley out there. And then health insurance, I would suspect at a minimum probably a 5% increase on the health insurance, because that's just how the market is going these days. And when other people were experiencing those 10 to 15% increases, because our fund was performing well, we didn't experience those. And so our time is probably reducing coming up. And so I put the 5% on the health insurance. So if you do the 2% cost of living and a step increase, 5% on the health insurance, that's $159,000, almost $160,000 just in fixed personnel costs with those two decisions, given the employee makeup in the general fund. So now we'll say the four biggest revenue line items that we have. Sales tax, state aid, property tax, utility transfers. If all of those increased by 3%, we bring in 152. So that's we're underwater $7,000 just on those two decisions with those big four revenue sources. Okay. So when we're talking about the public safety sales tax and those sorts of things and using some of that money for public safety, that's kind of what we're facing right now moving forward, is that dynamic. And I would suggest that these things have been the same, or these things have been like this for the last 5 years. But there's a few things that are hiding the predicament, and that's the last page. Okay, trying to tell a story from 2020 to 2025. Sales tax, as we demonstrated, we're putting an increased amount of sales tax into the general fund. So much so that we did it. Like the difference between the 40 and the 42.75 is that $118,000 equivalent. Interest earnings in 2022 when we got here, or when I first got here, we were earning only $15,000. Well, interest rates went up. drastically. And now we're at a point where we're able to budget for $350,000 in interest earnings. So that has helped cover some of that gap. And then also to federal COVID money that we received in 2020 to 2022. You know, millions, the previous city auditor and city administrator put that money in the general fund. And so, and because we were of a town of a certain size, we could just report the COVID money as a revenue loss. And then we could use it for general government expenses. And you'll recall the city commission approved that we would just use that money for police department salaries, which would then fulfill that requirement for our use. And so we've sent some of that money to other places, like Public Building Reserve Fund, some for economic development, to help out with the dockside projects, those sorts of things. But that's kind of masked some of the issues, I think, where our revenues and the expenses where we're going. They're not in sync. And so long-term, I feel like we're gonna have some conversations with that if we don't develop further revenue sources. Or you have to consider reductions in spending, which, as I think we've demonstrated, a lot of it's on the public safety side and a lot of it's on salary. And I tell people when, we're not in the city commission chambers and they talk about some of the city spending, I say, well, a lot of it's on the public safety side, right? And I think that the commission, in the effort to reflect the priorities of the community, I mean, forgive me, but we have a former police chief, a former police detective, a former fire chief, and a veteran of foreign wars on the city commission. I think that signals that public safety has been important, right? And so I remember the last time we floated a reduction in public safety, but the fully staffing of the fire station, right? And we all know how the conversation went. So if that's not going to be the case, then it's additional revenue sources. And so really, this is meant for you guys as the commission, it's meant for the public. And so if there's information that was communicated here that was not in this presentation that you'd be interested to hear, that's our jobs here as staff, is to make sure you have that information. So I would turn it over to you.
Thank you for the update on the budget and all the information that we now have absorbed. So take it and go through it, and then we'll start having our budget process meetings coming up shortly.
Yep, and at which point we will go in detail in police and fire department,
Okay.
and the general fund and all the water and sewer. Some of it trying to wait until after the sales tax vote to see how that goes. But I will go over, if it would please you guys, on the first meeting in July, we'll go over some of the bond funds, some of the things that really there's not like a lot of policy decision making with those sorts of things. I'll present those to you guys, and then on the 21st, we'll have the airport and the library here for that on that normal city commission meeting, and then we'll probably have to have one or two special meetings between that and budget preliminary approval.
Okay. If there's no other business to come before, special meeting is adjourned.